We are introduced to Kanata, who has just made the horrible mistake of going on a date with Crazy. If it wasn't already clear, those 38 stab wounds were fatal, so Kanata gets isekai'd in the worst possible way. But things don't get any better for him in his next life either, as he wakes up to find this old, ugly goblin staring at him. He doesn't understand what's going on, but it seems he has been reborn as one of them, so the elder gives him a new name, Gobro. The old man then proceeds to shove a big and juicy maggot down his throat for that bonus protein. And since Gobro is a baby, he can't speak or refuse anything. By day 2, he woke up to find himself surrounded by tons of ugly green babies, and he is faced with the reality that he is just as ugly as them. He comes to terms with the fact that he died and was reborn as this weak and helpless baby, so he spends the rest of the day crying over the loss of his beautiful human face. By day 3, he realizes that goblins seem to mature way faster than humans do, but that doesn't change the fact that he is still bald though. At least he is able to move and speak again now. So while it's not ideal, he chooses to make the best of the new life he has been given and heads out to face the world. On day 4, the now mostly grown goblins meet with the elder once more as he is holding a platter of maggots for them. He tells them he is done with taking care of them since they are freeloaders, so after today, they are on their own when it comes to finding food to eat. Gobro doesn't like the idea of eating maggots willingly, but it's pure protein, so he scarfs them down regardless. Afterwards, he now has to head out into the world all on his own, and as he exits the cave, he finds a beautiful world with unfamiliar plants and animals all around. One other goblin that had followed him is scared to be outside for the first time ever, so Gobro tries to reassure him by saying it's his first time seeing this place as well. The other goblin is Gobakichi, and although he is not very smart, Gobro decided to team up with him for one very important reason. He got the bulk genetics, so he's going to be helpful in hunting for food. They find a rabbit in the forest, so Gobro sends Gobakichi to attack it from the front. The rabbit runs away from him, but this was all part of the plan as Gobro had set himself up in a nearby tree, so as soon as the rabbit got within range, he leaps down from the tree and snaps the bunny's spine with that stick. This hunting strategy is really effective, but after the bunny has been caught, Gobakichi started getting a little greedy over the bunny, so Gobro had to smack some sense into him so he knows who's in charge here. After giving him a good dose of domestic abuse, Gobro begins prepping the bunny so it can be ready for their dinner. He snaps the rabbit's corn off, and after inspecting it, he figures he should be able to make a decent weapon out of this thing. Just then, he sees a notification in his head, and he doesn't know what to make of it since the elder never gave a tutorial on this. But his thoughts are cut off as Gobakichi has recovered and is salivating for his share of meat. Gobro conceives and pulls out the meat, which Gobakichi proceeds to gobble up with gratitude. On the 5th day, the two continue their hunting strategy, and Gobro has successfully implemented that rabbit horn as a weapon. As he takes a new horn from the rabbit, he receives a notification in his head again, but he's still not sure what it's supposed to be. He sits down to eat some meat, but once he takes a bite, his eyes begin to glow blue, and he is informed that he has acquired an escape skill from the rabbit. It all makes sense to him now as he recalls that in his past life, he had the rare ability of absorption, which allowed him to have a chance of absorbing the abilities of anything he eats. Although he still has absorption, it seems that all the other abilities he managed to gain have been reset since he is in a new body. It's still pretty lucky that he got to keep a skill at all, so he's okay with how things have played out since there are plenty of monsters lurking in the forest that he can eat to gain power. By day 6, Gobro has already started attracting girls with his impressive meat. She is amazed that he and Gobakichi had managed to capture horned rabbits when others have died trying to do the same. And since she actually has hair, it is officially confirmed that goblins can have follicles, but Gobro and Gobakichi are just bald. Gobro asks if she would like to participate in their hunt for the next day, and she was overjoyed at the offer. But on the 7th day, it rains so much that they had to postpone their hunt. Since he has nothing better to do, Gobro decides to go check out what they've got in storage since he has never been back here before. However, he wasn't prepared for what he would see there. He found a group of captive human women, which proves that even in this world, Goblin Slayer was right all along. He's just going to try to ignore it, so he spends his time crafting a weapon instead. The goblin elder named Gabji comes over to him since he seems to be oddly motivated to survive. At this rate, he believes Gobro might level up faster than expected. Gobro didn't know there was a level system here, so Gabji tells him to tap his forehead so he can see it. After doing so, Gobro sees that the elder is currently at level 86, and he mentions that if one manages to reach level 100, then they'll be able to evolve into a higher being. However, goblins age so fast that even though he's only in his 20s, look way too old. As he leaves, he tells Gobro that he'll get to see what an evolved hobgoblin looks like when the promising youngsters return from the village, but something doesn't sit right with Gobro. The next day, it was clear out, so Gobro went out hunting with the other two. Their teamwork is outstanding considering they are only a week old, with Gobmi as backup, Gobro as their mid-range attacker, and Gobakishi as their forward. With this formation, they were able to get themselves a large haul of meat, and Gobmi is brought to tears as she takes a bite due to how thick and juicy it is. Gobro takes a bite as well, and he ends up learning several new skills from snake meat. The next day, they kept hunting, but by day 11, they made the mistake of going into an unknown cave, and they found themselves staring down a huge swarm of vampire bats. They immediately start running away, but the bats are too fast, so Gobakichi and Gobro stay behind to deal with them. They were getting overwhelmed at first, but then Gobro uses the evil eye skill he acquired and freezes all the bats in place. With all the bats frozen in place, they then proceed to kill all of them, and afterwards they dine on their corpses. Gobro gains some new skills from eating the bat meat, including echolocation, vamp up, vamphilia, and COVID-19. As they continue to eat like kings, they are watched by some of the other goblins, who are starving since they are too dumb to successfully hunt on their own. That night, they attempted to take their frustrations out on him since obviously, he's the one with the problem, not them. If they put this much effort into catching food, then maybe they wouldn't be so hungry, but they failed to account for the fact that Gobro has a search ability, so he could sense them approaching. He counterattacked them, and although he didn't really intend to kill anyone, he miscalculated on the amount of his venom skill to use, so one of the attacking goblins ended up dead. He didn't seem to care though, as he still wanted to teach them a lesson for trying to assassinate him. However, Gobmi shows up, and after what she did to them for attacking her precious Gobro, even Gobro feels sorry for them. The next day, they head out to hunt again and are planning a coordinated jumping on this orc. It was just minding its own business when they throw a rock in its eye, and while it's blinded, Gobakichi rushes in. The orc knocks him back with its pickaxe, but immediately after, its fingers get smashed by another rock. They then proceed to claim its kneecaps by inverting the bend of its knees with a club. And to finish off, Gobro stabs it in the head several times. After the orc has been killed, they enjoy its meat, but since they got a lot left over, Gobro decides they should take it all back to the cave, since there is something he wants to do. Once they've brought all the excess back, Gobro calls the attention of all the broke and starving goblins and tells them that they can eat as much as they want as meat. After some initial hesitation, one after the other, all the goblins drop to their knees and begin gobbling up Gobro's delicious meat. As he watches them, Gobro thinks about how he would never have helped people out like this in his past life, but maybe being reincarnated changed more than just his body. That night, after everyone has gone to sleep, Gobro is laying down and trying to do the same, but the notifications in his head won't stop playing. It says he has exceeded the level requirement, so he will be evolving into a hobgoblin soon. However, he wasn't paying attention to it since he was so sleepy. The next morning, something strange happens as Gobro wakes up and discovers that he now looks different. He is confused why his appearance seems to have changed again overnight, plus he looks a lot more similar to the way he did before he reincarnated. And more importantly, he is no longer bald. The same thing seems to have happened to Gobakichi as well, and Gami, although she stayed the same, she is loving the new look on her friends. The elder comes over to see what all the commotion is about, and he is shocked to find that both Gobro and Gobakichi have managed to evolve when they were literally born 2 weeks ago. Gobakichi gets Gobro's attention and says he would like to test out how much stronger he has gotten. But hunting won't be enough to satisfy him, so he wants to have a fight with Gobro himself. Gobro is up for the challenge, so the two head out to begin their match. They both begin boxing out in the forest, and Gobakichi is definitely a whole lot stronger than he was before, but he still lacks the combat skills necessary to be able to take Gobro down in a fight, as Gobro is able to slip under a punch and sweep his legs out from under him. Gobakichi admits defeat and praises Gobro for being so strong, but Gobro gives him credit as well, since when it comes to power, Gobakichi is stronger than anyone else here. Just then, Gobro hears some wolf noises off in the distance, and he can tell that something bad is going to happen soon. He calls for Gami, who is hiding nearby, to spy on them, and tells her that she should go get the crossbow they had made earlier because they are going to be needing it soon. Wolves are chasing a bunch of rabbits down the hill, and once they have successfully killed their prey, they lock on to their next unsuspecting target, a probably innocent orc that was just minding his own business. The orc starts running for its life, but the wolves aren't about to let it get away so easily, so they start chasing it down until they eventually catch up and tear it to pieces. Gobro and Gobakichi watch this all go down, and they think the wolves will be the perfect opponent to test out how strong they have truly become since they evolved. Gobro signals to Gobmi to begin firing at the wolves with a crossbow, and once the leader is taken down, both Gobro and Gobakichi rush in to start smashing in the wolves. Without their leader, the wolves' teamwork was completely gone, so they were able to make quick work of them and slaughtered every single one. Afterwards, there was just the leader wolf left standing, but he too would eventually succumb to the wounds he sustained. After he collapsed, Gobro approached and opened his mouth to take a huge bite out of the wolf, allowing him to gain some extra skills, including one leadership skill. Gobro takes the rest of the dead wolves back to the cave and tells the other goblins that they are free to eat as much as they want, but from now on, he expects them to catch their own food. They don't have the confidence to accomplish something like that, so they all get down on their knees and beg Gobro to teach them how to hunt for themselves. He agrees to train them in the ways of hunting if they don't know how, and if they need weapons, he'll teach them how to make those as well. This gets everyone to like him a lot, so he is cemented in as the leader of the goblins. It may partially be because of his leadership skill, but that doesn't matter to him. He will work hard to lead his comrades, and he'll continue to eat and gain new skills as he goes, all for the sake of achieving his goal. Day 17. Gobro wakes Gobji up from his nap to inform him of an incident. All the human women whom they had locked in the basement realize that Goblin's Slayer isn't coming to save them. So rather than spending the rest of their lives as breeding slaves, they offer themselves with poison, so Gobro and Gobji hold a memorial and burn the bodies. By day 23, Gobro had begun training all the goblins in the ways of not sucking and being a goblin. And while he was doing this, he also spent some time hunting and eating any and all monsters that would provide him with useful skills, so he has got quite the arsenal of skills at his disposal now. Just then, he notices several figures approaching from a distance, and while they may look like goblins, he's not the type to trust strangers blindly, so he draws his sword and prepares to cut them down. However, he is stopped by Gobji, who tells him that those goblins are the fathers of the current generation of goblins, and they're home with the milk. Gobji is happy with the haul of food the old goblins returned with, and they also happen to capture some more women to be used for breeding, so Gobji is rather glad about that as well. Goblin DNA is so strong that even if they mate with other species, it will still result in a goblin baby, and while Gobro can understand the instinct to reproduce, he still has to admit that this is really messed up and he needs to do something about it. He goes over to the biggest hobgoblin of the older generation and asks if he can be in charge of taking care of the women, but the old goblin gets angry because he wanted to take them for himself. Gobro isn't one to back down, so a fight was about to break out between the two, and both generations were ready to jump in to help at a moment's notice. But before the bloodbath began, it got broken up by two other goblins. They would prefer it if they didn't cause a civil war to break out between the generations, so they suggest that the two people with beef settle it in a way that won't get them involved. These two are Hobsato and Hobsi, and they suggest that the leaders of both generations have a battle to settle the dispute, so the winner will get to decide what the village does from now on. They also make a rule banning weapons, so that no one ends up dying, and the older goblin agrees to the term, not knowing he's about to get his ass beat. And a couple minutes later, we see clear evidence that the older goblin indeed got his ass beaten. Gobro has him tied up in a spider's web, but he assures everyone that this doesn't count as cheating, since the webs aren't a weapon. He produces it from his body like Toby's Spider-Man thanks to a skill he got earlier, so with the current alpha tied up and beaten, Gobro has been crowned the new leader of the village, and no one dares to object because they don't want to end up like the old leader. Later, Gobro goes and tells the captured women that he has instructed all the goblins not to lay a hand on them, and he won't be touching them either, so they have nothing to worry about. He'll make sure they are well taken care of, and eventually he'll see to it that they are sent back to a human village. The girls are relieved to hear that they will be alright, but there has to be some kind of catch to a deal like this, so one asks Gobro what he wants them to do in exchange for their freedom. Gobro does feel bad for them, but that's not the only reason he chose to help them out. He has no other way to get any information on the matter, so he tells them that all he wants is to learn about the human world here. So after talking with them for a bit, he finds out that these women were part of a traveling merchant group, but when they were attacked by the goblins, all their men were slaughtered, and these 5 were the only ones who survived the attack, only to be captured and brought here. They start to cry after being forced to relive the tragedy they went through, but it's not like Gobro can say, "Sorry, my people wiped out your friends and family," so he just gets up and walks away. A couple days pass, and the women seem to be more cheerful regarding their current situation, but it's probably just their way of coping. From the time he has spent with them, he has learned that humans in this world don't evolve the same way monsters do, but in exchange, they are able to take on multiple jobs. The red-haired one seems to be a rookie adventurer as far as Gobro can tell, but she's pretty weak as far as warriors go, so he may have her join the goblins in training later. Speaking of training, Gobro made all the older goblins join in on the training as well, and it doesn't matter how old they are. If they get pissy with him, he's going to smack some sense into them. For the next few days, Gobro focused on group exercises so that he could teach all the goblins the new rules he had set for them, and you can tell the former leader is not happy about it, but he can't go against Gobro's decisions anymore. On the 31st day, it was rainy, so everyone stayed inside. Everything was perfectly normal, but then Gobro's detection skill alerted him to some goblins heading towards the human women, and he knows what that means. The former leader has gathered a couple of his buddies, and they were planning to have some fun with the humans, but Gobro shows up behind them, and he distinctly remembers spending a couple days going over the rules with them. But it looks like some people never learn, so he's going to have to teach the old man another lesson. The women wake up to the sound of Gobro killing one of the insubordinate goblins, and they are obviously scared. The other goblins had heard the commotion and rushed in to see what happened, so Gobro asks Gobmi to help him drag all the goblins he tied up outside and to tell everyone to gather around because there's something he wants to show them. That night, in the pouring rain, Gobro proceeded to beat the rule-breaking goblins to death, leaving the former leader to suffer the worst fate as Gobro's personal punching bag until he was just barely alive, only to be left out in the rain to die a slow and painful death. With this, Gobro asks if everyone understands the rules and what will happen if they break the rules, and no one dares to say a word. The next day, it's back to the regular hunting, and the group is up against a trekhorn with scales that make it almost really difficult to pierce. The trekhorn charges at Gobro, but he uses his spider silk to trap it in place, and with it immobilized, both he and Gobakichi were able to target its weak points and kill it fairly easily. After it has been defeated, Gobro and the others eat the meat, and he gains several new skills, one of which is a skill called Triple Strike, and even though he is doing it himself, Gobro still has no idea how the extra 2 strikes are being generated, but he's not going to question it. That night, while Gobro was in bed, the red-haired human came up to him and just climbed into bed with him. Nothing unholy took place that night because she was probably still just scared from what had happened the previous night, so Gobro let her sleep in his bed. However, by morning time, Gami had gotten jealous, so she climbed into Gobro's bed as well. In other news, the goblin Gobro had assigned to be carrying all the equipment managed to evolve as well due to all the manual labor, so she is now relevant to the plot as well. The training of the goblins has been divided into different units, with Gobakichi handling the armored units, Gobmi handling the ranged units, and Hobsato handling the regular fighters. And now that Gob has evolved, she handles the training of the support goblins. Meanwhile, Hobse is busy doing absolutely nothing because she is the only mage among the goblins, meaning there's no one for her to train. Gobro decided to leave the training of the goblins to the appointed captains while he heads deep into the forest to hunt some strong prey. While there, he spots another trekhorn in the distance, and since he has the element of surprise, he decides to try using a magic skill he had acquired previously, casting Phase 1 Demise Magic. And once his attack hits, the trekhorn that they had had so much trouble defeating earlier was easily destroyed in a split second. That landslide victory may have made him a little too overconfident because he then decided further north into the forest, but only once he had gone in really deep did he remember what Gobji had told him a couple days after he was born last month. He was explicitly warned never to go into the northern part of the forest, because in there lives a crimson creature called the Red Bear, and now he has come face to face with said Red Bear due to his carelessness. Any rational being would have already started running away, but even though he can't guarantee it, Gobro still believes that he may be able to take this thing down if he comes up with a plan. He wants to kill and eat the bear to gain even more skills, so he activates his Demise Magic and gets ready to throw everything he has at the bear. Back at the cave, Gobmi is getting worried since she hasn't seen Gobro all day, and neither has anyone else since he left their training session that morning. But the others aren't really worried since Gobro is strong enough that he'll probably be fine even if he gets himself into trouble. But I don't know if he has a plan for this because the bear managed to dodge the attacks. It lost an arm in the process, but it's still every bit as dangerous as it was before, so Gobro can tell that if he gets hit by one of those claw strikes, even the refined scales armor skill he got from the Tricorn wouldn't be of any use to him. Just as he can't afford to take a single hit, he resolves to kill the bear as soon as possible. However, even after striking it in the skull with an axe, the bear still keeps chugging along, so Gobro is forced to step back and try something different. He attempts to use his spider webs to trap the bear, but is too strong for that and breaks itself free. The bear then activates one of its own skills and launches a wave of fire at Gobro, which sets the whole forest ablaze. The bear begins walking away since it assumes there is no way Gobro survived that attack. But despite that blast of fire being around 2,000 degrees hot, Gobro still managed to survive, so after getting to cover, he begins healing his arm while he thinks about his situation. He has never heard of such a thing as a fire-breathing bear before, so it looks like in order to take this thing down, he is going to have to be willing to take some amount of damage. He heads back out as the bear is leaving and baits it into launching a fire blast at him once again. But this time, he has come up with a plan to counter it and uses water magic to block the inferno, while he continues to charge forward. The bear's body is too hard to pierce normally from the outside, but it's probably a different story when it comes to the inside of the bear's mouth, so Gobro stabs his sword through the bear's mouth, leading to a wound which he assumes will be fatal. However, he gets snapped out of his confident smirk when the bear smacks him across the forest and into a tree. Gobro managed to take an arm from the bear, slash it across the head, and stab it through its mouth, but is still showing no signs of collapsing. However, after that one strike, Gobro is on the verge of death and will definitely croak if he takes another one of those hits. But that just makes it more exciting for him. He charges back in and raises his axe to strike the bear, while the bear readies its claws to strike as well. But once the clash is over, one of Gobro's arms is seen flying through the air. The bear had indeed managed to rip his arm off, but at the end of the day, Gobro was still alive, even if he is barely a step above passing out dead. He grabs the bear claw that is impaling him and takes a bite out of it, gaining 2 new abilities, but he succumbs to his wounds and passes out afterward. He then receives a notification that the level requirements have been reached, so he is allowed to evolve into a rare ogre class, which he immediately accepts. After some time, he wakes up and finds he has evolved yet again. His hand is regenerating. Thus, when he returns to the other goblins, they are all in shock by how he has become. Gabi scolds him for being away and making them worry. She tries to leg kick him, but our boy stands there and takes it like a man while Gabi drops to the floor screaming in pain. This was the end of episode 2. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to not miss the next part.